Hey everybody, you've got Renee here at Mold Mending. Welcome to part 2. We're going to get a sneak peek now of that IICRC standard and reference guide for professional mold remediation, also known as the S520 guide. In part 1, I gave you details of what it is and why I think it's so important. Here in part 2, I'm going to give you, or sampling, we'll call it that, of this guide, so that you can consider having it as a item for yourself for when you cross mold remediation needs in your own life or in somebody else's life. You can pass this on to them. Thanks for tuning in. Of all the things that I've seen out there, this is the most detailed and the best medically sound advice that you can find for this mold remediation. Okay, the one we're talking about is mold remediation. So you'll find that one. It says ANSI IICRC S520 standard for professional mold remediation. Now, someone who purchased it, actually, they scanned it, and I'm going to the tchd.org document center view. So you're able to take a view of this standard, but this is the 03 edition that I'm showing you now online. But what I'm showing you is the different chapters in this standard procedure. Okay, now when you are at the IICRC website, when you actually purchase the guide, I think it's like 70 pages, but what you get is the full standard guide as well as their supplemental reference guide, which is smaller. And it's copyrighted, so you're not able to make copies of it and distribute it to other people. You can verbally share it, but in order for people to have it in hand, that's an item that should be purchased. So I just wanted to show you a table of contents. I'm not going to read to you all the details here, but here, table of contents of the mold standard for mold remediation. So it has both the standard guide and then the reference guide as well in with it of the S520. Okay, so I'm just showing you table of contents. So chapter 1 is the fungal ecology of indoor environments. Chapter 2, health effects from indoor mold contamination. Chapter 3, principles of mold remediation. Hello, administrative procedures and insurance. That's chapter 4. Chapter 5, limitations, complexities, complications, and conflicts about mold. Chapter 6, inspection and preliminary determination. This needs to be done as part of your mold remediation. Chapter 7, structural remediation. Chapter 8, HVAC remediation. Chapter 9, contents remediation. Chapter 10, tools, equipment, and materials. Now, when I say contents remediation, that means the belongings within that building. Chapter 11, safety and health. Chapter 12, indoor environment professionals and assessments. The IEP is the person you have coming out first to assess the damage and the issue and how much mold is going on. Then they give you a plan. They walk through a plan of how the remediation should be done. Then you bring in your professional mold remediator. Both of these, the IEP, the environmental and the indoor environmental professional, as well as your mold remediation company, they both should have a certification of the IICRC. Okay, then Appendix A, mold remediation certificate authorities. Appendix B, suggested guidance for the selection and use of respiratory protection. Then your glossary, your sources, abbreviations, etc. But I just wanted to show you this so you get an idea of there are some details behind it. And I'm going to also tell you on a side note, nowhere in here does it say use bleach. And that is one misinformation piece that's out there. So this chapter 3, they show a little bit of it. It says principles of mold remediation. 1, you need to provide for the health and safety of the workers and the occupants. It says performing mold remediation can expose workers to health and safety hazards. I'm going to keep going. Number 2, you need to document the conditions and the work processes. An effective mold remediation plan cannot be developed without first determining the extent of contamination to be removed. Number 3, you need to control the contaminant at its source. Mold contamination be controlled as close to its source as possible. When mold spores are aerosolized, they become much more difficult to capture. Remember I mentioned this earlier, somebody down there just pulling stuff out, everything's aerosolized. Come on, people. Step 4, physically remove the contamination. It tells you exactly how to get rid of this. It says attempts to kill or encapsulate mold are not adequate to solve the problem. Step 5, correct the moisture problem to prevent recontamination. Since mold spores are present at background levels in a normal fungal ecology, mold growth is virtually inevitable if moisture is not controlled. That's just part of chapter 3. Anyway, please consider reading before you go and check out all these other YouTube channels, all these other websites. There's so many people that are just piecemealing what a medically sound mold remediation is, and it's incorrect. So when I share my information, I'm sharing it from the IICRC, the S520 standard guide and supplemental reference guide for mold remediation. It is the easiest to follow. Yes, it's long, but once you've gotten through it, I even highlighted the things so I knew what steps that we needed to make sure our people that did mold remediation, as well as ourselves that did a DIY one under the advice of a mold remediator, because it was a smaller job. I followed the IICRC S520 standard to make sure we didn't miss a beat and to make sure that I stay healthy. So why is this such a big deal? Because I want you well, and I do not want you to have mold aerosolized in your house. And I do not want anyone working on your mold or anyone dwelling after it's been removed to be affected by it. That was what almost killed me. So I want to save others from having that issue. So remember, we can be well even while ill, and please check out the full version or check out part 1 if you just heard all of part 2 so you get the full picture of why I am sharing this with you. Take care.